This is Linda Lehrhaupt, and I'd like to welcome you to the Mindfulness-Based Teacher Project. Podcast number 7, Finding Your Authentic Voice.
I was recently rereading Parker Palmer's book called The Courage to Teach, and came across a section which I was deeply inspired by. In a section called Mentors Who Evoked Us, he says that when he's leading teachers in workshops exploring what he calls the inner landscape, he asks them to introduce themselves by talking about a teacher that had a deep impact on their lives. After the participants have shared, he then asks them another question. Don't tell me why your mentor was great, but rather tell me what was it about you that allowed great mentoring to happen. When I read that, I was immediately taken back to something that happened which I feel had a profound impact on my life, both as a student and as a teacher. But it was not easy. When I was writing my doctoral dissertation, I found it extremely difficult to put on paper what I had experienced as a vibrant, rich, and unbelievably exciting time. I had done field research on pilgrimage in Ireland in 1984 and 1985. I spent a lot of time walking with pilgrims, sitting with pilgrims, visiting them in hospitals, and just was filled with a very rich and inspiring picture, which again was not always pleasant, but nevertheless stimulated me completely. And then to have to put that down on paper was so uninspiring, and also to have the feeling that I had to couch it in the theoretical constructs of my academic tradition disheartened me. There was also something coming up which I wasn't really so in contact with at the beginning, but I was really afraid to say what I thought. I had a wonderful mentor and professor. I was so inspired by her, but I was also intimidated. I was paralyzed by my fear that I wouldn't live up to her expectations. I knew that as I wrote the dissertation, I was really playing it safe. I spent a lot of time writing about the historical aspects of the pilgrimage, things that were factual and one really couldn't criticize or conflict with. On the more theoretical chapters related to my subject, I just put my toes in the water. I did a lot of quoting of other scholars in the field, but I got it done and I turned it in. It took me well over a year to write what amounted to about a 400-page manuscript. After about a month, I received my dissertation back from my teacher. When she called me in for a meeting, she said, I don't want to know what other people think. I want to know what you think. Do it again. I left her office not so much in shock, but in a deep sense of shame. I was ashamed of myself for being caught out. And I went into a search about why was I so afraid to put myself forward, to say what I thought, even if it conflicted with perhaps what others thought, and to really present my point of view. I did do it again. This time I came a bit more forward in presenting my own point of view. I took out a lot of quotes, and I knew I was still holding back, but I felt that this was the best that I could do at that time. I gave it in to my professor, and again, about 1 month later, she called me into her office, handed me the dissertation. She had gone through it with a fine-tooth comb, editing, questioning. It was a sea of red. She just said a couple of words to me. Better. Do it again. I left the office, not so much ashamed, but this time I'd say I was pretty pissed off at myself. And something about the situation, which could have turned into a sense of paralysis and just wanting to chuck the whole thing in the garbage can and go away, somehow that didn't happen. And what came up in me was, all right, what have I got to lose? And I took another year to say what I needed to say, throwing caution to the wind, not violating principles of sound scholarship, but just really coming out there and saying what I need to say. When I handed in to her the third time, she said, okay, it's okay. She didn't say it's great. She didn't say it was fantastic. She and I both knew that, but it wasn't as brilliant as it could have been. But both of us were ready to let it go and move on. What did I learn? I really think that the whole process was about finding my authentic voice as a student and also in my teaching career to find my authentic voice as a teacher. The question is, what's meant by being authentic as a teacher? I know for myself that it comes up when I feel that in class, I'm not really saying what's in my heart. Now, sometimes there can be very good reasons not to do that. It may not be appropriate, or it may be interfering with the process of the student. But if I stay with it long enough, I notice that it's because I'm feeling hesitant about hurting the student in some way, or opening up a can of worms in class. And when that happens, I don't always feel okay about it. Sometimes after class, I'll ask myself, well, why didn't you say something? And when I begin to criticize myself and get on my own case about it, I've learned with time that that's not really helpful either. It's much more helpful to simply stay with, as best I can, emotion or feeling that's present and try to honor that. Because the way to authenticity is not through the application of successful technique, but it is really about being able to be with one's own quote unquote inauthenticity and be present with it with kindness and openness. Parker Palmer goes on to say in this section that mentoring is a mutuality that requires more than meeting the right teacher. The teacher must meet the right student. So in a situation where I feel that I haven't spoken in an authentic voice, means that there's something for me to learn here. And if I can learn that, then the student that I have worked with has become my teacher. So we're mentoring each other And often I've experienced that willingness to be with my own difficulty of not speaking from my heart helps the student to encourage them, without my using words, to speak from their own place of authenticity.
How does this happen? Sometimes by my asking as gently as possible, what's true for you right now? It encourages people to be in touch with their own authenticity and to speak from there. I've learned to recognize the signs that this is happening and to be patient and silent, not interrupting, practicing supportive presence. The voice of authenticity takes time to emerge, and one of its unconditional needs is that there's a safe space in which it can be heard. Then we are connecting honestly and openly with each other. It's a kind of magic. Thank you for listening to the Mindfulness-Based Teacher Project.